Now, another really big question that shows up in the agriculture course is really these questions of cosmic and earthly. What is that and how does it work? And in the first lecture, Steiner points out that the silica is really this substance that is this carrier of this cosmic activity, and the calcium is the carrier of the earthly process. And it's quite a fascinating thing, because in the first lecture you go, oh yeah, that's easy, you know, the cosmic is out there, and the earthly, it's all on the earth, and the calcium is on earth, you know, through living substance. Most of the calcium that we've got free on the planet is from a living process, and all that, so the earth, cosmic, right, got it. And he makes this comment that the outer planets are related to the cosmic and the inner planets related to the calcium, great. Till we get to the second lecture. And then all of a sudden he says, well, the silica process is coming from the earth and the calcium process is coming from above. And that the outer planets are coming from below and the inner planets are coming from above. Then we go, whoa, okay, right. And then, of course, by the time we get to the sixth lecture, and he just spins that whole story around the other way, and we go, this is getting confusing. And at that point, you sort of go, oh, he must have been wrong. It just must have been wrong. So we're going to just wipe all that out. We just won't bother with that. It's too difficult, okay? We just won't deal with that. And so I was quite lucky that I have a friend, Menzo de Boom, who studied at Goetheanum for 4 years and Emerson College for 4 years. And when he came over, he sort of whispered in my ear and he said, hey look, just look at this picture. Look at how this might work. You know, he said, it's not mainstream, but it was whispered about, you know, around the Goetheanum. And so what we can read in the second lecture quite clearly once we see it is that Rudolf Steiner is talking about this cosmic activity being you know, in the warmth and in the light in our environment. And that now, in the autumn time, that light and warmth process is being drawn into the earth, and that it gets, in a sense, sucked into the earth and is crystallized by the silica in the winter. And that in the springtime, that force then comes back up again and is the upward thrusting force that wants the plant to go to seed. And so he gives this image of this circular process of silica. And it's quite an interesting fact that if you have a cold and wet autumn, and then you'll find your seed viability in the following year will be quite inhibited. And so you can see how this process is being carried through. And similarly, if you've got hot, dry autumn, regardless of the spring, you'll have good seed viability. So we're sucking this in and we're bringing this back. Quite an important statement that he makes in the second lecture, so 3 times, is that it is clay that facilitates the upward movement of this silica process. And he says this 3 times, very clearly. And so this is the sort of image that we get, is that we actually have a circular process for silica, and similarly we actually have a circular process for calcium. The calcium one is a little less obvious, but it's the way I understand it is that we have the minerals and cations and so on in the soil, and they're drawn up in the water through the plant. And as it goes through the plant, it's spinning up through the vessels of the veins of the plant or whatever, getting ever so small until all of a sudden it's puffed out as transpiration. And that this moisture, now I should say that spinning process is actually a potentizing process. So that we're potentizing the minerals that are in the water, and that is being puffed into the atmosphere and then will return to the earth as dew. And so this is what he talks about as homeopathic calcium. That there's this, in our environment, we have all of these cations basically that are suspended in the water as a life-stimulating process that can be drawn back into the soil and held into the soil by humus. And so this is the important part of humus, is that it allows this life process to be held instead of coming and going. Now, I missed earlier talking about the silica process, where he talks about sand being the carrier of this, what he calls cosmic substance, or the light and the warmth in the atmosphere is drawn into the soil through the sand, the quartz sand. And it's the clay that lets that run. So the upward moving process of the lime is really the cations in the soil, and it's not just calcium, it's also potassium and magnesium and sodium and zinc and copper and all of those cations. And this goes up, and it's the humus that brings it back down. And so what we can see quite clearly in the second lecture is that these four elements, the clay, the sand, the humus and the lime, act as the mediator of those four processes in that soil chemistry. Now, if you're going to build a potting mix, what are you going to put in it? You're going to have some kind of decent sort of clay type soil. You're going to want sand to bring your aeration. You want a humus of some kind to bring some carbon, and you've got to put some cation nutrition in there. So these are these four basic elements of any soil. And so one of the things that I like to do is that whenever you go onto any property, what is missing out of those four activities? Because not only is your soil not going to work if it doesn't have these four activities going on, the energetic activity isn't going to work either.